1 year into this war, Putin no longer doubts the strength of our coalition, but he still doubts our conviction. He doubts our staying power. He doubts our continued support for Ukraine. He doubts whether NATO can remain unified. But there should be no doubt. Our support for Ukraine will not waver. NATO will not be divided, and we will not tire. President Putin's craven lust for land and power will fail, and the Ukrainian people's love for their country will prevail. Democracies of the world will stand guard over freedom today, tomorrow, and forever. So that's what's at stake here. Freedom. That's the message I carried to Kyiv yesterday, directly to the people of Ukraine. When President Zelensky said he came to the United States in December, quote, he said, "This struggle will define the world and what our children and grandchildren, how they live, and then their children and grandchildren." He wasn't only speaking about the children and grandchildren of Ukraine. He was speaking about all of our children and grandchildren, yours and mine. We're seeing again today what the people of Poland and the people across Europe saw for decades. Appetites of the autocrat cannot be appeased. They must be opposed. Autocrats only understand one word: no, no, no.
That was Joe Biden speaking in Warsaw, Poland, delivering a decidedly unambiguous message to the world's most dangerous autocrat. And before I do anything else, I want to contrast what Biden just said and the message he delivered in no uncertain terms with what Donald Trump said just one day earlier.
Another example, Putin never, ever would have gone into Ukraine if I were president, never. And I told him, I actually had a very good relationship. By the way, that's a good thing, not a bad thing. You know, these idiots back there would say, he's very close to Putin. Remember when they hit me with the question, who do you trust? Your intelligence people in the United States. They're not intelligent. Your intelligence people. Comey, McCabe, Strzok, Lisa Page. How about Lisa? Or Putin. And I said, that could be the toughest question I've ever been asked as a politician. They wanted me, and then when I really didn't give them a very good answer in terms of exactness, because I didn't want to, because I didn't trust these people. They're bad people. These are bad people. And when I didn't give, all hell broke loose. But that's okay, that's okay. And it turned out I was right. I was right about that too. These people, what they have done to our country with the fake Russia scam, and it's just incredible. But Putin never, ever would have gone into Ukraine.
Pretty amazing contrast between a president who's clear about where he stands on the issue of democracy versus autocracy and a former president who admits that he literally trusts Putin more than our own intelligence agencies. Call me old-fashioned, but I tend to like when presidents of the United States side with the United States. The guy says that the question as to who he trusts more over our own intelligence agencies was the toughest question that he was asked as president. The fact that he thinks deciding between a murderous despot who's currently engaged in a genocide against the Ukrainian people and American intelligence agencies is difficult shows that he's either the easiest mark that Putin has ever laid eyes on or too corrupt to care. But either way, probably not great for our country here. He even whines about the, quote, fake Russia scam. And look, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because his sob story is like 4 years old at this point, and while he doesn't seem to mind repeating the same tired material day after day, it does kind of wear on me. But I will say this, while Donald Trump pretends that the Russia investigation was a witch hunt, remember, that investigation resulted in 34 indictments, including George Papadopoulos, Paul Manafort, Rick Gates, Mike Flynn, Michael Cohen, all of whom themselves pleaded guilty. Consider, too, that based on the Russia investigation, we know about a number of instances of cooperation between the Trump campaign and Russia, like how Paul Manafort shared polling data with the Russians, how Mike Flynn told the Russians that Trump was going to lift sanctions that were put in place after their cyber attack on the U.S. election, like how Donald Trump himself even went on national TV and asked the Russians to hack Hillary Clinton's emails, which they attempted to do that very day. So I get that Trump and his mouthpieces want to pretend that the Russia investigation was a hoax because it exposes so many of them as criminals, but if they were worried about optics, they should have thought about that while they were, coordinating with the Russians. And finally, Trump spends the rest of his time trying to justify his coddling Putin by trying to paint a bunch of law enforcement agents as evil. Here's the thing. What's so telling about Donald Trump's stump speech here is that it betrays just how deep down the rabbit hole he is. I mean, this guy won the presidency in 2016 by running as a populist. He clearly wasn't a real populist since he was only interested in actually helping millionaires and billionaires, but still, he at least knew to market himself as a populist while running. Fast forward now to 2023, and his stump speech is ranting about Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. You think any regular families out there who aren't mainlining Tucker Carlson have any fucking clue who these people are? And so all this shows is that Trump has lost the one thing that he had going for him in 2016, which was his ability to connect with regular people. He's just devolved into this perpetual victim whining about aggrievement politics. But hey, what do I know? Maybe real America is just clamoring to get into a voting booth to have their voices heard on the issue of siding with Vladimir Putin over Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. But let's be clear, it's not just Trump who can't hide his disdain for America while gushing over autocrats. The failure to support democracy has effectively pervaded the entire Republican Party, a party that at one time branded itself patriots and constitutionalists. Here's Fox's Peter Doocy struggling to wrap his head around the very concept of applauding democracy.
President Biden disagrees with that, and we expect him to expand on that theme later on today at this speech, which should start in a few minutes. And it's not the solemn set of remarks that we were kind of told to expect based on the existential threats that he sees. It has almost a campaign rally feel, like if they were having a campaign rally for democracy, Harris.
Peter Doocy just explained the concept of a rally for democracy with the same confidence as an 80-year-old explaining Snapchat filters. Like, yeah, dude, it's a rally for democracy. The world is contending with a horrific threat by authoritarian governments. There's a land war in Europe for the first time since the 1940s. We're a democracy, and we are supposed to be on the side of democracies. This shouldn't be confusing, and it certainly shouldn't be controversial. But I guess when you align yourself with a political party that views democracy as antithetical to their entire worldview, then suddenly the concept of a rally for democracy seems foreign to you. The simple fact is this: we have one major political party in this country that does not support democracy. They don't support that system of government because it no longer comports with their sole objective, which is to hold on to power by any means necessary. They don't want people to vote because then they will lose. They don't want districts to be fairly drawn because then they will lose. They don't want the citizens of DC to have statehood because it'll dilute their unfair advantage and they will lose. And so the natural conclusion of that is that they will not only oppose democracy at home, they'll oppose it abroad. They have no more incentive to pretend to defend the Constitution because it doesn't serve them anymore. That's why they're calling for secession. That's why they're staging insurrections. That's why they're siding with autocrats and dictators. So I hope that Americans are paying attention, because it's not just about gas prices and taxes anymore. It is about the foundation of this country and whether we want to be led by those who value democracy or those who want to subject you to their version of the Kremlin right here in the United States. Before you go, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. You can click the thumbnail right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work even further, the best way is to subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. There you can check out my interviews with major players in the world of politics, including President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Katie Porter, Jamie Raskin, and so many more. Plus other interviews that live exclusively on the podcast. That link is also right here on this screen, or just search No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen wherever you listen to podcasts. Today we're going to talk about some good polling news for Biden ahead of November, and I interviewed the host of Strict Scrutiny, Leah Lippman, about all of the cases that Trump is contending with right now, from New York to Georgia to Florida, as well as the Supreme Court looking into the question of presidential immunity. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're watching No Lie. So for the first time in the better part of a year, Decision Desk HQ's polling average, they're a great polling firm, has Biden narrowly leading Trump 45% to 44.9%. So certainly not some runaway victory for Joe, to be clear, but if we're looking at momentum less than 6 months out from Election Day, that is clearly in Joe Biden's favor. Granted, I do have to note that in the same polling average, Trump is still narrowly leading in Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, so it's an uphill climb for sure. But again, if we're looking at momentum and the way it's going, in that case, I would rather be Biden than Trump. But here's why I think the momentum is going to continue to go in Biden's favor. First of all, the economy remains strong, and it also takes time for people to actually feel its effects. The stock market, for example, just hit record highs. People are going to look at their 401ks and recognize that. The economy added over 15 million jobs and counting. Unemployment's been below 4% for the longest stretch in half a century. We continue to outperform the rest of the G7 countries as far as our economic performance is concerned. Inflation's a bit sticky, but remains low. Wages are rising. This isn't the economy from 2 years ago or last year, and American sentiments on the economy are going to catch up with that, but it'll take some time. It will catch up, though. There's also the fact that Biden's opponent, Donald Trump, isn't doing himself any favors. First of all, he is in the midst of his criminal trial in New York right now. The country is being reminded about what a piece of shit he is on a daily basis. Stormy Daniels has given a detailed account of their affair and how he didn't care, for example, if Melania found out. Meanwhile, Trump, who refuses to even take the stand, just denies that they had an affair at all. So I wonder who the jury is going to believe here. So a criminal conviction may certainly be on the horizon. It looks like it will be. And polling from the latest Reuters Ipsos poll found that when registered voters were asked if they would vote for Trump if he was convicted of a felony, only 24% said yes, while 60% said no. Even among only Republicans, 24% said they wouldn't vote for him if convicted of a felony. That would be a massive defection. I mean, hell, even if that number ends up only being 5%, it would still be enough to tank Trump in November. At the same time, he keeps flirting with this idea of getting thrown into jail for violating his gag order, which I've mentioned numerous times that I really don't think he wants to do. But just humoring him, if he did, well then, one of the lasting images that voters would get before they head into the voting booth in November would be the Republican nominee literally sitting in a jail cell. And I'm not here to give campaign advice to Donald Trump, but can't see how that's going to expand his tent. And then, of course, there's the issue of abortion. And for some reason, unbeknownst to me, they keep digging themselves deeper in this hole. Republican senator from Alabama and woman who may or may not have bodies in her basement, Katie Britt, is pushing a bill to launch a federal database to track pregnancies. Holy shit. Trump, meanwhile, just got on stage at his latest rally and said this.
So I want to just thank the 6 Supreme Court justices, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, John Roberts, Brett Kavanaugh, Neil Gorsuch, and Amy Coney Barrett for the wisdom and the courage they showed on this long-term, very contentious issue.
Literally thanked the 6 conservative justices for overturning Roe at his rally in public. So no, he's not going to escape this issue that has dogged Republicans, mostly because he himself refuses to stop congratulating himself on it. Dude has such an insatiable ego that even though the issue of abortion is crushing Republicans across the country, even in Ohio and Alabama and Kentucky and Virginia, Trump is so desperate for validation, for applause from his far-right rally crowds, that he'll keep reminding the rest of the country that he was responsible for what happened with Roe. Now, granted, it's not totally smooth sailing for Biden. There's still the issue of Israel that's hurting him with young voters and progressive voters. Inflation, as I mentioned before, is still being stubborn. And companies that are raking in record profits don't seem to want to relinquish any of that money. But Biden still has a little bit of time to get all of that stuff sorted. And in that time, Donald Trump is certain to continue mismanaging his legal issues and ramping up the threats against democracy and digging in his heels on brutally unpopular issues like abortion. But none of this is to make you complacent or make you think that we've got this in the bag, because we don't. And I mentioned at the top that we're still trailing in a bunch of must-win states. This is all to let you know that we are in an all-hands-on-deck moment right now. So here's what I would ask. 6 months out from Election Day, and this is always my advice, find 1 or 2 people who wouldn't normally vote and make them your responsibility. Here's my favorite stat. In Wisconsin in 2020, Donald Trump lost to Joe Biden by 2 votes per precinct. That's all. That's all that separated a Biden win from a Trump win in the tipping point state. If everybody watching does their small part, I promise it'll have an impact. And I know that you've all got someone in your life who doesn't pay attention to politics or who doesn't vote, because my own sister recently asked me what a governor was. So if my sister is that blissfully unaware, then I know that we've all got people that we can work on. We are less than 6 months out here. Let's make sure that we can look back at this moment and know that when democracy was on the line, that we all did everything we could to protect it. Before we get to the interview with Leah, just a quick note. I have an announcement here. I'm writing a book. It's called Shameless. It's available right now for pre-sale. If you want to pre-order it, just go to briantylercohen.com/book, or you can click the link in the post description of this video. The book features interviews with like an all-star team: Pete Buttigieg, Jen Psaki, Al Franken, Mark Elias, Dan Pfeiffer, Mehdi Hassan, Heather Cox Richardson, and the foreword was written by Jamie Raskin. I'm really proud of how it turned out, and I'd really love for you to read it. So again, if you'd like to pre-order, just go to briantylercohen.com/book or click the link in the post description. Here's a preview of my interview with Leah Lippman. Do we have any indication as to when the Supreme Court may rule regarding this absurd question of presidential immunity? Because we've already passed some opinion days and we haven't heard anything. So my worry here is that they don't issue an opinion until the last possible moment by design. And of course, the longer we wait, the more of a delay that we have in the DC prosecution.
There's no indication about when they might rule, and you should believe anyone who tells you that an opinion is coming or is going to come on a particular date. Of course, there are some mile markers that we have in mind for the date by which they should probably issue an opinion if there is any hope of a pre-election trial. But other than that, we have no idea about when they might release an opinion. Other than that, by custom, they release opinion in argued cases by the end of June.
Even if we do get a decision at the end of the term, would there still be time then for Judge Chutkan, who's presiding over the DC trial, to schedule that trial before the 2024 election?
I think if they wait until the end of June to release an opinion, that would be really difficult to get a trial scheduled before the election, because Judge Chutkan had indicated she needed 80-some days of pretrial proceedings. Right, exactly. And so if it's end of June, then 88 kind of pushes it until well into the election and possibly after. Whereas if they released it at the end of May, then I think there is some possibility, depending on how they write the opinion, of a pre-election trial.
Well, as if we needed the added anxiety here, isn't it also possible that the Supreme Court could withhold the decision on this case until even the next term, meaning we wouldn't even have a decision by the end of June, which would be the last possible moment in this term?
That's possible, but extremely unlikely. It's very, very, very rare for the court to put off a decision in a case until the following term. Again, by custom, they release all the opinion in argued cases and, by the end of the term, which is, end of June. Now, they've done that in a small handful of cases, but usually under the auspices of requesting additional briefing or adding additional questions from the case. And it was clear from the argument in this case, they were just fine injecting the additional questions right into the case as it was. And so I guess I am not personally expecting them to delay it until the following term.
Okay. I mean, couldn't the argument be made that most of this is not what we expected anyway? I mean, for them to take up this question of presidential immunity for someone who's sitting in the Oval Office and committing criminal acts, that also seems unexpected in terms of them taking up in the first place when there was a perfectly reasonable, airtight justification with the lower courts.
I think, of course, this case is unprecedented and unusual in a lot of ways. Having a former president accused of multiple crimes, including the very serious crime of refusing to leave office and interfering with the peaceful transition of power, is unusual and unprecedented. That being said, I think the Supreme Court taking an important case that presents a novel, unprecedented question about the scope of former presidents' immunities from crimes after they leave office is not unusual. I think what is very concerning is that they waited to take this case until the last possible moment, rather than taking up special counsel Jack Smith's invitation to do so much earlier, like in December, before the DC Circuit had ruled. But again, I don't know that signals that they would put off the decision until the following term rather than just delaying until the end of this term.
To watch the full interview with Leah, click the thumbnail right here on the screen or check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel. You can also click the link on the screen for the audio version of this episode. And of course, to see more of my content, the subscribe button's on the screen as well.